Invest Africa, proudly brought to you by KPMG.
Hello and welcome to Invest Africa. I'm Tumisho, Grater. The 2015 Brics summit recently took place in Russia, with leaders participating in discussions on trade and investment in the emerging economies. Before we head into our studio discussion, I spoke with Tito Mboweni just after the summit. Mboweni had been appointed as non-executive director to the board of the new development bank. The bank, backed by Brics countries Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa, will lend money to developing countries to help finance infrastructure projects. Let's take a look at that conversation.
The new development bank, I know people call it the Brics Bank. It's easier that way because the founding members are the Brics countries. But the way it has been thought about is that over time, this bank can invite other members to join, or indeed other countries might wish to apply for membership. That's why we moved away from legally calling it the Brics Bank and calling it the New Development Bank, because it's going to be a game changer. It's going to grow with time. So the founding members have now contributed $100 billion as the capital base for the bank for now. And there was division amongst the members about how much each is going to contribute, and China obviously contributing the largest base. So there's $100 billion. I think the key question is, what is this thing going to do?
But I want to get to the quick question. What I want to know is, how is South Africa going to fund their contribution?
Well, the government has funded its contribution already to the capital base. And then there is the currency reserve management component of it. I mean, a contingency reserve management, which is funded by the central bank. So both on the capital side, the government's responsibility, and on the reserve, on the contingency reserve, is the central bank.
Okay. I want to, you spoke about...
Now, nobody must say,
because
I know, particularly South Africans, very sometimes narrowly focused at home. Why should we take $5 billion and put it in this new development bank when we should be building houses?
Yes,
that's a wrong question.
You said it would be a game changer, so tell us how.
So that's but I'm saying, our people will say, but why don't you build houses? This is a very narrow approach to how you would tackle the bigger development questions that confront us. So we would broaden our outlook, to broaden the way we see things. So what was the question?
You said that this would be a game changer. And how is it going to be different from the likes of the IMF?
Well, why in the first instance did we think it was necessary to start a new bank? The two probably more reasons. Firstly, the modus operandi of the World Bank, the African Development Bank, and other development banks, Latin American Bank, have been found to be a bit weak, in the sense that they didn't seem to respond adequately to the needs of developing countries. More often than not, there were stringent conditions which, when applied in total, they resulted in stagnation, no growth, and so on. And brought many of the particularly African and Latin American countries into serious financial problems. Now, the introduction of the new development bank is a game changer in the sense that we want to introduce new forms of doing things. In fact, one of the new phrases that we have coined is, normally people talk of best practice. We're now talking about the next practice. To do things differently from what was called best practice to the next practice, which is a far more responsive approach to development financing. Sure, much more risk-taking than has been the case with the World Bank or the African Development Bank. Game changer in the sense that as soon as we introduce this next practice,
yes,
the existing institutions will also begin to relook at themselves. Why is it that this institution has come into being?
Joining us now is Glenn Ho, Director at KPMG. Glenn, thanks so much for making the time to join us today. I think first, looking at Brics as the bloc, I know that you have been following the Brics Summit very closely. You were there in, say, 2013, and during an interview you spoke about how they still weren't clear about the mechanisms and how the Brics Development Bank would work. We are now sitting in 2015. Are you seeing more clarity in terms of where we're going?
Definitely, Tumisho, and I think if you look at what the Brics Business Council has put forward, the type of mechanisms that they're also recommending from a good governance point of view for the bank to adopt, I think we're well on our way to something good here.
When it comes to how much clout the Brics as a whole has, how much pressure or influence do you think that this particular group would be able to exert?
I think because of the significant amount of contribution they make to global growth, there is a significant amount of clout they can have. But obviously I think there's the other big players, and it's all about being cooperative with other existing institutions in the world, but also to have a voice for these five rapidly growing economies, although not so rapidly growing at the moment, but significant economies in the developing world.
A big question that has been asked has been around China, Glenn, and given the fact that they have a contingency reserve that is set to absorb shocks when there are things that happen in the economy to any of these member countries. But China definitely having a very big influence there and contributing a significant amount, more than 40% of that amount. Can we say, and is it fair to say that there's no way that we would be able to stop China's influence, given the fact that they are pouring the bulk of the resources into the Brics Development Bank?
I think we'll still have a significant say in it, although they've made a major contribution in terms of the capital input to this new bank. In terms of the way that they've set up this new development bank, I think everyone's going to have an equal say. That's what the intention is at this stage, and they also want to create a new world order where there wouldn't be domination by one particular party. So I think whether that happens in practice, we'll have to wait and see, but I think that's the intention, for us to have an equal say in the running of this bank.
During the interview with Tito Mboweni, he spoke about the Brics Bank being able to carve out a niche. What would make this particular institution different to the likes of the IMF?
I think possibly certain projects where they could work in conjunction with the IMF to ensure that development occurs, and also maybe the risk profile of some of the projects that the IMF might not want to embark upon. That's where they can actually play a bigger role.
In terms of some of these projects, some have said to be, Mr. Mboweni went on to say that they want to take on more risky projects. But the deployment of these projects across the African continent, of course, we would like to see obviously benefit being had from an African perspective. How do you think it may work in making sure that there is equal deployment of these projects across the continent?
I think the important bit is really to assess these projects. I think in the recommendations from the Brics Business Council, it's talking about a proper technical assessment of all the different projects that they want to embark upon. And I think if you also look at some of the infrastructure projects being touted by all 5 Brics countries, one would probably want to look at those projects that would give the biggest impetus to economic growth in the region. So I think that would be a key factor.
Well, we're heading into a short break. When we come back, we'll talk more about those infrastructure projects. That $50 billion, is it enough to plug the infrastructure gap here on the African continent? When we come back, we'll be joined by Ndaba Ntsele, Chief Executive of Pamodzi. He'll be joining Glenn Ho and myself. Stay tuned for more on Brics. Welcome back. You're still watching Invest Africa. Still in our Cape Town studios is Glenn Ho, Director at KPMG, and we are now joined by Ndaba Ntsele, Chief Executive of Pamodzi. Ndaba, let me pick up with you. Before we went to a quick break, we were talking about the funds and how they will be deployed, and of course Africa and South Africa wanting to be a beneficiary of that. $50 billion, which is the initial capital. How far can this go in bridging the infrastructure gap that we are currently faced with on the African continent?
Look, I'll say it's a very wonderful thing. It's a catalyst, and when you run businesses, you need a committed fund, and then it becomes easy to also look at other funders and motivate the funding. The fact that this $50 billion is going to be managed by people in the emerging countries, they know exactly our situation. Therefore, they will put the equity funding there, and then we can go to the likes of the IMF, the big insurance company in the world, and top up. And we can also use a different model of funding from them. Maybe we can secure loans. Now that you have an equity portion, it's actually quite brilliant.
Mm-hmm. Glenn, let me come back to you in Cape Town. As Ndaba was just saying, that it is really a brilliant model. And when it comes to those riskier assets that the former Reserve Bank Governor Tito Mboweni alluded to in the interview earlier on, he even mentioned Greece as possibly being people that could come to the fore and they'd be able to fund. Just your take in terms of, again, funding from this specific institution.
I don't think so. I think if you look at the New Development Bank at this stage, it's actually quite a small institution. I don't think something like Greece would be something that would be of interest to them at this stage. I think it'd be more to deal with developmental infrastructure developmental projects in Africa and the developing world. So I don't think a Greece rescue type of situation would be something that this bank would be looking at.
In terms of the biggest beneficiaries to this, and you mentioned a couple of points that you really wanted to highlight, and foreign direct investment being a key one for you, and you say that we could leverage off the fact that we've got this development bank now.
Yeah, most developed countries, the big key is foreign direct investment. And of course, going to Brics as a country, it gives us an opportunity to showcase our country and which qualify the stats that says in terms of foreign direct investment, in terms of rating, we are higher than all the Brics countries. We might be equal with one of them, I'm not sure which one. So it means we are a safe country to invest in. And then of course, with the likes of China, the Brazils, you meet countries that have done very, very well. I would like to mention their state-owned enterprises, people that are representing on the Business Council. You've got a CEO of a state-owned enterprise and is in the Fortune 500, which is a complete different line in South Africa, because our state-owned enterprises are still struggling. But they get exposure, and I saw that our country now is going to go to China to try and learn how state-owned enterprises can also be big listed conglomerates.
Mm-hmm. So definitely using that link there to get the state-owned, or using our link with China as being one of the ways to to foster economic growth here on the African continent.
Yeah, in fact, all East China, Brazil, and also Russia, they're excellent in terms of great things that they've done. They are entrepreneurs, they are businesses, and also they are state-owned enterprises. Because what we need in South Africa is we want to be industrialists, and these people are great industrialists. So we're thinking of now developing black industrialists. So Brics is the greatest education where you can be to see practically of people that have made it, including India themselves. We are small in Brics, but the nice thing, we are going to grow fast because we are, as a country, we are small, but we are playing the big league with these 4 other countries.
Glenn, I'd like you to respond to what Ndaba has just said, and one might say that the BRICS countries as a whole, maybe they are irrelevant. You look at South Africa and they'll look at our low growth rates. People would argue that India seems to be the only bright spark there. China's had their issues, the stock market just a couple of weeks ago, and of course the questions being asked around the GDP print around that. Then we've got the likes of Russia and Brazil. They all have their own set of problems. So given all of this, what is your argument to still say that we are able to have a bloc that works cohesively here?
I think they're still significant. Even if China's growth slows down below 7 to even 5%, it's still a significant amount looking at the world's second largest economy. India as well is probably going to hit over 7% growth this year, so that one's got a long way to go still. A lot of development in India, and I think initiatives by China with their One Road, One Belt project, I think that's just introduce a new game changer for them as well in infrastructure development that will also touch the African continent as well as parts of the Middle East and Europe. And I think from that perspective, there will be opportunities for the commodity producing countries to also assist in this development. And if you look at what the BRICS Business Council is also suggesting, that from a commodities-based economy, that we look at beneficiation, which will be of benefit to countries like South Africa in this group, and that can only bode well going forward as well.
In fact, I just want to also flag something about India. Before BRICS, we went to SPIF in St. Petersburg, and India announced that they are going to spend $3 trillion in 5 years' time for infrastructure. Now, what does that mean to South Africa? We've got the best companies in terms of building construction. So there you are, we've got an opportunity by being part of BRICS, and as I'm saying, our companies are rated among the best in the world, so that we can be able to assist India to grow their infrastructure, our construction company. And we can also supply certain materials because the areas where South Africa is good. So that's a huge benefit of South Africa being part of these BRIC countries.
Ndaba, infrastructure is broad. In your opinion, which infrastructure projects need to be prioritized?
Look, infrastructure is broad. Roads, dams, communication is very, very important, because once you start doing that, like in our country, we've got the best infrastructure because we maintain the roads. We can reach point. In fact, there's not a single national road where you cannot travel at 180 if you want to. You're not allowed to. It means the roads are good. So water, but roads and communication links people, and that's a huge opportunities for our country, and we've done very well. I mean, we've got the likes of MTN that did very well, the Vodacom. So it's a huge opportunity for South African companies that have done this. And secondly, we are there not only for South Africa, for the continent. Our continent is a virgin in terms of the infrastructure itself. So linking with our BRICS partners, we can grow and develop our infrastructure in the continent.
Glenn, let's pick up from that inter-regional trade and making sure that we can foster trade between the different member countries. Your suggestions?
I think the infrastructure, as Ndaba's alluded to, the rail links, road links between the different African countries to foster that trade, I think that would be very effective. And obviously, I think building the power grids that will be necessary going forward. And if we can get the Inga project going again, going for a start, I think that would be a great boost for industrialization on the continent and being a green energy to a large extent. So to get the energy going and also to get the road and rail infrastructure for trade and development.
Glenn was talking about getting the ball rolling. Is the problem not the policies in place?
Yeah, you see, the nice thing about Brics, you've got business people that are there. So these are, when we announce, some of the business companies are ready for the rollout. And that is and you can partner with some of these companies to action. And I think policies, in South Africa, we are ready with a lot of policies.
So implementation maybe?
Yeah, implementation. We've done it, 100% ready. So it also giving us a chance to twin some of the companies that have done well in China, to twin and be partner with them. I know people at times get scared about being a partner of a giant, but then when it comes to business, you've got a set of rules, and business is run by rules. So you can twin anybody. Hence, in this country, there's also a protection of minorities if you're a shareholder. So that's not a big problem because of our democracy and the rules that we have.
Mm-hmm. Glenn, let me speak to you with regards to making sure that the scale is evenly balanced. If you look at China and Africa trade, there have been thoughts or there have been criticisms that this is not evenly balanced, that we're just not seeing the same type of benefit. Is this in fact true?
I think to a large extent up to now, and I think the African voice has been made to China, and China has taken note of it. They know for sustainable relationship going forward, the skewness has to be addressed, and I think those are areas that they are looking at. I know as far back as 2012 at one of these summits, it was announced that they'll be looking at more beneficiation in Africa, sending more finished products through to China. Even from a South African perspective, we see now more agro-processing goods going through to China. So more and more of those issues will be addressed, I think, just to address some of that skewness in the relationship. But it's a relationship that's also growing. So things that start off as export of commodities to more finished good products going forward, I think that will be more of the future.
Before I come back to you, Ndaba, just some of your closing thoughts there, Glenn, in terms of what is our biggest challenge now. So if you could tick some of the boxes as to what we need to fix to make sure we're on the right path, what would be some of the key things that we should start tackling first?
Some of the things to look at, I think, is to really the action plan that we've got from the Brics Business Council. I think if you look at what the progress has been made from the previous year, if we can just continue addressing issues around freeing up trade between the different countries, looking at red tape that you can get rid of, looking at issues around the customs duties between the different countries and products, then also looking at things like visa restrictions at the moment, looking at giving special access to Brics business executives between the different countries to make it easier to travel between the countries to ensure that trade happens. And then obviously I think issues around the new development bank to really get that going, which has already gotten going at a very fast rate from 2 years ago.
Ndaba, maybe you can pick up on some of the key things we need to address, and of course maybe your hopes, what you would like to see come out of this.
Yeah, one of the big problems that we have to address is the visas for business people. We were generous. We discussed about the visa issue, and we gave our counterparts a 10-year multiple business visa. But then in our case, we've got a single entry visas to these countries. Now, you can't do business if you've got a single entry. I mean, right now, my visa to Russia, my visas to Russia, they're about 5 or 6. Now, we've got to sort out that thing, and forcefully, because, as I said, we react in South Africa professionally very, very quick. The second one is, as a country, we've got to preach industrialists, entrepreneurs, to create a lot of entrepreneurs, because these markets are open for us to export. The balance is not equal because we do not have industrialists in this country that can export things. We've got professionals, we've got good banks, and if I've got to mention companies that are great industrialists, like Aspen, for instance, they're number 5 in the world in terms of manufacturing and also positioning themselves globally. They've just positioned themselves right in Russia. So internally, creation of entrepreneurs, industrialists is very, very important, supported by the government. Business government must work together to create awareness of entrepreneurship, because all these countries, they've created entrepreneurship at the highest level.
Well, thank you so much, gentlemen, for making the time to join us today. A big thank you to Ndaba Ntsele. He's the Chief Executive of Pamodzi, and in Cape Town, Glenn Ho, the Director at KPMG. And of course, if you'd like to take this conversation further, you can tweet us. You can use the hashtag InvestAfrica. From myself and the team, have a great day.
Invest Africa, proudly brought to you by KPMG.